This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And our show today on Monday, December 19th, 2022, will reflect on impressions. And we have with us at WZRD a very, very special guest, Robert Farrell. He is an author, he is an expert at interviewing, writing resumes, and getting people employed. Good morning, Robert. How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning.
First of all, Robert, tell us a little bit about your expertise. You are an author, and then you have a lot of experience helping people, coaching them for interviews and helping them write their resumes. How did you get involved in all that in helping people?
I used to teach at a business college. It was called Kelsey Jenny College in San Diego. And they would give me different classes for whatever need they had at the time. And at one point, they gave me a class on job search skills. And so that was kind of the beginning of when I started writing resumes for people.
Mhm.
And since then, I've written over 800 resumes for all kinds of people, all walks of life. And a few years after that, I got another job where I was actually doing seminars twice a week on the job search process, the resume, the interviews, all of that.
Let's get back to your own experience with resumes and interviews. Did you learn all these skills in class, or was it more of your experience? And how did you become an expert in resume writing and interviewing?
Well, it was a little of everything. It was definitely some personal experience, but teaching the classes forced me, I guess, for lack of a better term, to really develop that skill. And then I got really excited about doing it. I did it, as I said, for probably over 800 different resumes in my lifetime. And then I actually wrote a couple of books, neither of which got published, but I wrote a couple of books. I did radio interviews, television, all of this in San Diego. And it was just something I really enjoyed doing. I love it when somebody says they got a job because of something I said or did to help them.
Mhm. Were you ever interviewed on KZSU?
No, I was interviewed. I don't even remember the names of the stations. They were in San Diego, but I
Mhm.
don't remember at the moment.
Oh, no problem. Well, how did your own first job interview, do you still remember how it went? And what was your impression of what you did the best and what you did the worst at that time?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say an interview is any contact you have with anyone who can help hire or supervise you, or someone who needs someone with your skills or abilities, even if it's not at that time. One of the earliest interviews I remember was a job interview at McDonald's when I was about 16. And I remember I filled out the application, and then I went downstairs, and I did not know that all McDonald's have a basement. I didn't know this. So the the manager was looking at my application, and he was kind of not looking happy. I don't know if he was mad or just uh, studying it intently. And so to break the ice, I said, I just heard a couple of weeks ago that all McDonald's have basements. And he looked up at me and he smiled. And then we got into a conversation. And I don't even remember, and I think this is sometimes a principle that works. I don't remember that we talked a lot about the job. Now, of course, this was a minimum wage job, you know, working at McDonald's. So it's not like you're going to, at 16, have a lot of experience. But I have found the best interviews, the most successful interviews I've had, have had at least some element of conversation in them.
Mhm.
That is, you're not necessarily directly talking about the job, but you're just having a conversation. And that's actually very appropriate because often the person you're having the interview with is someone you're going to be working with, and they want to know that you're easy to talk to and someone they can get along with in the workplace.
Oh, that sounds very reasonable. Did you get the job?
I did.
And so that stuck with you. And did you realize at that time how important that was, or did you realize it later when you started coaching people, and or maybe along in your experience, did you have a conversation with most of the people who later hired you?
A lot of times I did. I learned it. It was learning through studying and looking at my own experiences. Uh, and I have to say, my father kind of knew a bit about this. And so a lot of times I think about even today, some of the things he said that were helpful.
Such as?
He said, always treat people well because you never know who can help you in life.
And did that advice ring through for several times for you? How you treated people, and then later unexpectedly that person was able to help you?
Yeah, but I also believe that it's just nice and it's good to treat people well, whether or
Mhm.
not they can help you.
Mhm.
It's just a good idea to be nice to people.
When your students, your former students or former people that you've helped with interviews or resumes come back to you, did they tell you that, well, thank you for helping them, but did they mention what helped them the most after working with you?
Well, a couple of things. First, a lot of people do not come back, have
Mhm.
not come back to me, and I don't take that personally. I just think people get the job and they're very happy and they just move on with their life and they don't think to tell me. Uh, and that's okay. I mean, of course, it would be wonderful if everyone I helped called me back or contacted me and said, "Hey, thank you. This was really helpful." But I've gotten quite a few people who did let me know that they got their dream job or they something I said was really helpful, and that's always very gratifying. But it's also it helps me to know that something I said is valid and good information, and I can continue sharing it.
Did they mention what helped them the most? Some nugget of information that really helped them in their job search.
Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned to not bring cell phones to the interview." Sometimes people have said, "Thank you for talking about getting there early, because if I hadn't done that, I would have been really late because there was a problem getting there." Uh, some people have talked about something in the interview conversation or even before the interview, such as going into the bathroom and checking your face to make sure you look okay. Different people have told me different things, but as I said, I haven't gotten a lot of people calling me back or contacting me, but
Mhm.
that's just part of it. As I said, I don't take that personally.
Of course. When you mentioned about not bringing a cell phone to the interview, so of course that's so that the phone won't ring. But uh, did you also mean that even during the so where should the cell phone be, in the car or still on the person?
Well, whatever works for you.
Mhm.
If you can leave it in the car, you might as well. If you have to have it on your person for some reason, honestly, I can't think of any reason why you would need a cell phone during the interview process. Uh, if for some reason you absolutely need to have your cell phone, maybe there's some sort of emergency you're waiting on, then tell the interviewer, I know this is very unusual, but there's a very important call I need to get. But even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, no, basically leave your cell phone in your car or turn it off, or at the very least, turn it on silent and do not disturb.
Mhm.
So for example, I'll just say right now, my cell phone is here on my desk. It's on silent and do not disturb. So for as long as you and I are talking, I will not be getting any contact on my cell phone. I want to
Mhm.
give you my full attention.
So as soon as you walk into the building of the place where you're going to get the interview, is it also important to not be preoccupied on the phone as soon as you enter that building?
Yeah, turn your phone off, put it on silent, do not disturb, or leave it in your car, then walk in. And the moment you walk in, you're starting the interview process.
How so is that?
Because as I said earlier, everyone you talk to uh, who can help you, hire you, supervise you, uh, that's an interview. So you're interviewing with the security guard, or you're interviewing with the receptionist, someone at the front desk. Everyone you're talking to, you're making an impression on, either positive or negative.
Mhm. And while what is your advice about getting there early and how much time to spend in the waiting room, and then how you should behave in the waiting room?
So what I tell people is you want to be in the waiting room 15 minutes early, 10 to 15 minutes early, but that's in the waiting room. So what that means is you need to be at the site probably about 20 to 30 minutes early. And the reason you want to be there that early is because you might have to go through a gate to park somewhere, or you may not be allowed to park on the premises. And so you'll have to find street parking. True story, one time I had a job interview, and the place where I went, there was just no parking anywhere. And I was driving around and around trying to find a place to park. It was pretty stressful. So you want to make sure you get there early. And another thing I suggest is, if you've never been to the place or you don't know how to get there, if possible, go there the day before. I went to a job interview, and because it was new, the place was new, I'd never been there before. I went there. It took me almost 2 hours to get there. It
2 hours in transportation or in finding such as the right correct entrance?
well, no, for transportation, because it was in
Mhm.
the city of Chicago, but it was in another part of Chicago, and I didn't have a car. And so I had to take bus and a train, and then I had to walk. So it was almost 2 hours
Mhm.
to get to the front door. And so I was so glad that I went there the day before. And I literally, that's what I did. I found out how to get there. I went there, and it was an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I'm so glad I went the day before, because if I had thought, oh, it'll take me an hour to get there, I would have been late.
Mhm. What about the day of the interview? Did it take you the same amount of time to get there?
Yes, it did. I used the
Mhm.
same mode of transportation.
Mhm. Well, different times of day would be different kinds of uh, transportation as well. The busyness of the of the streets, etc. So, do you also recommend that if people were to go the previous day, should they go about the same time when the interview will be the next day?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Mhm. And was that the case with you when
Yes,
you?
that's about the same time. Yes, both days.
Mhm. So when did you discover that this was important? Was it a personal experience, or was it were you advised about that? How did you learn that this was such an important thing to do?
Just through teaching the class and my own experience.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, well, what about etiquette while you are waiting in the waiting for the interview? That 10 to 15 minutes.
So first thing I recommend is you ask the receptionist where the restroom is, and you go into the bathroom, you look in the mirror, you check your face, your nose, your teeth, check if you're wearing a tie or any kind of jewelry or anything. You want to make sure everything is straight and that you look professional.
Mhm. And what about while you are waiting, you shouldn't be using a phone. And then so what should you do? Make small talk with the receptionist or find something to read? What is the best thing to do, or maybe the best two or three things?
You can certainly talk to the receptionist. That can work sometimes, but they're working too.
Mhm.
What I recommend is bringing certain materials with you, such as if you have researched this company before and you have printed ahead of time information you found on the company, then you can look at that again. You can look at any book on job interview questions or anything that you've printed from the internet on how to answer certain job interview questions. Anything that will keep you in that frame of mind that you're about to have a formal interview.
Mhm. And what about resumes? Should the person still keep a copy of the resume with them during the interview, even if they have submitted it before?
Of course, you should have 2 or 3 copies with you.
Mhm. And usually those 2 or 3 copies are end up being used in what way?
Well, you can have one for yourself. As I said, they'll usually have one, or as you said, they usually have one. But in case they don't, it's just something to refer to. And a lot of times you can answer a question with, well, as you can see on my resume, and there you have your resume with you.
When the interviewer asks if the candidate has any questions, what would you suggest that the person answered that might be different from what we see in other interview books?
The best question, I think, is what's my next step? And you're using the word my
Mhm.
because you're saying, what am I supposed to do? I consider that I am now working for you, whether or not you've been offered a position.
Mhm.
And you want to know what your next step is, what you're supposed to do to secure the job. That's one of my favorite questions.
Mhm.
You could also ask, is there anything I did not answer uh, that you'd like to know so that you know I'm the best candidate?
Mhm. How much of what you researched about the company should you apply to the interview uh, uh, without overdoing it? What is the sweet spot?
For how much you can research?
Well, after you have researched, how much you should mention during the interview.
I don't know that there's a sweet spot, but you should let them know. And by the way, you can even have if printed pages of information you have found on that company. You can have them with you and kind of make sure they see that you have actually researched and you know some things about the company.
Mhm.
You can go to the company website. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stuff there, but you might find news articles about that company. Hopefully, you won't find any negative stuff about that company. If you
Mhm.
do, don't mention it.
Mhm. What is the protocol for interviewing for multiple positions at one time?
The thing you want to do is you only want to focus on one place at a time and give your full attention to that. And let's say you have 3 interviews in a day, 3 formal interviews in a day.
Mhm.
Well, so company A, you're fully focused on that, and you finish that formal interview, and then a couple of hours later, company B, and that's the only thing you're thinking about is company B. And
Mhm.
then later, company C, and that's the only thing you're focused on. Now, interestingly, and interviewers are not really supposed to ask this question, but sometimes they do. I actually was eating at a restaurant and I overheard this guy on the phone. He was sitting right next to me, and that's why I overheard him saying that the interviewer asked him, "Are you looking for other positions?" And this question flustered the interviewee.
Mhm.
So this fellow and I got to talking after he finished his phone call, and I told him, well, obviously it's hard to think on the spot sometimes when you're under that pressure, but the best answer to that question, are you looking for at other places, is the only place that matters at this moment is this organization right here.
Mhm.
They really aren't, interviewers are not supposed to ask questions like that. It doesn't mean they won't, but they're not supposed to.
Have you ever trained interviewers uh, instead of interviewees about how to best find a good candidate?
Probably, yes, I have actually. I've done seminars, and there have been people from uh, HR departments and stuff, and I've talked to them about the interview process. And they've actually, it's interesting because I've had people from colleges and schools, and they're the career counselors for those places. And it's always been the funniest thing because they'll come to me and they'll say, I didn't know half this stuff. This is really fascinating. This is so interesting. So yeah, I have trained some people.
Mhm.
It
And
hasn't been formal in terms of, but I've had people come to my seminars and I've taught them a few things, I guess.
got it, got it. Seminars. Okay, we also have with us who just entered the interview, fellow wizard. Hello, fellow wizard. How are you today?
Hello, it's wonderful to be here, Station Manager Wizard, and it's wonderful to be here with Robert. Thank you so much. I just have a couple questions. I met Robert before, and he once told me that my tie was over my shoulder, and it was because I was outside. But you really do have to check these things. Like sometimes you don't see it unless you actually go to the restroom or you have a friend tell you about it. And when my tie was over the shoulder because I was fixing a banner outside, I had no idea. And I really appreciate that little bit of advice, Robert.
You're
Really,
welcome.
really cool. I was wondering if you're applying for a specific job, um, if you um, if you tailor your resume. Do you have a straight resume or do you have a tailored resume? Are there things you include or do not include according to what kind of job you're applying for?
So the key word to all resumes is relevant. So you want to make your resume relevant to the position. So absolutely you do tailor your resume to every position. Now think of the whole interview process and the whole job search process as dating. Now, if you date someone, you go out and you have a nice time, but then the next week you have a date with a different person. They're two different people. They're going to have different uh, desires and wants and likes and needs. There's going to be a lot of differences. There might be some similarities, but each date is a little different. So you want to tailor yourself in the interviewing, in the resume, and the job search process to each individual organization. Now, you can, of course, also have a general resume that would work for anyone. But if I know there's a specific job, I want to tailor that resume, write things in that resume that apply to that position.
I was speaking with another employment network that has a base on Facebook and has a podcast. And one of the things that this professional said was, if you're applying for Wendy's, you want to say that you previously worked at McDonald's because they have a great training program, but you don't want to say that you formerly worked at Burger King because Burger King is very set in their ways and the transition doesn't go very well and they won't hire you. Have you heard of such things?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry, I don't know if it was on my side or your side, but you were saying something about Wendy's and McDonald's. Can you repeat
Well,
the
if you're applying for Wendy's, I heard that if you're applying for Wendy's, it's good to say that you previously worked at McDonald's because they have such a intensive training program, and Wendy's wants that. But I heard that if you say you worked for Burger King previously, Wendy's will not accept you because they have totally different ways of management over there, and it is not complementary to Wendy's. Have you heard of any other examples like that? What not to include in your resume?
I mean, if you know, okay, so first of all, if I had a job at McDonald's, if I had a job at Burger King, it's relevant and it does need to go on my resume unless I had that job for fewer than 6 months. But I would still put it on there. But if you can put on your resume skills that would be relevant to Wendy's, you still have a shot.
So in other words, you're saying that let's say you worked in other retail, and those skills might be transferable over to the job at Wendy's. So you could mention that, let's say you worked at a clothing store as a sales clerk, at customer service. You should also tailor that experience toward Wendy's as well, correct?
Yes. That would be handling cash and credit transactions, for example, customer service, that kind of thing. You may be opening and closing the location.
And what if you're I'm on a bus right now. What if you're traveling and you already made a mistake, you're 15 minutes late? How do you recoup from something like that? How do you recoup from your mistakes?
Apologize. Just, say, I'm really sorry. This doesn't usually happen, or it's never happened. I apologize. And, things can happen. I remember an interview once, true story. The one time I was late for an interview, I left plenty of time early. I knew I'd be fine. And there was huge construction on the street where I was. Traffic was backed up. I couldn't move. I was stuck. And I wound up being late. And I said, I'm really sorry. I left very early, but I just did not anticipate this construction. Nowadays, there's apps that'll tell you if there's construction or if there's some kind of problem. But this was a long time ago. And I said, I'm really sorry. This has never happened to me before. I'm very embarrassed. There was construction. It was blocked. I couldn't move. I wound up getting the job. So it worked out, but I was pretty frustrated and stressed, obviously, before then. And that's another reason why you want to be there early. It takes us about 10 minutes to get focused if we're going to a new location. So if we get there if our interview's at 9 o'clock and we get there at 9 o'clock, well, we're going to be pretty stressed and not focused for about 10 minutes.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, And we have with us Robert Farrell, and who is an author and also an expert in job searches. And we also have with us a fellow wizard. Okay. Well, Robert, when you are, have you ever interviewed someone for a job?
I've done practice interviews with people, but I've never actually hired someone. So no, I've never formally interviewed someone for a job.
Mhm. Well, we're not sure if you want to reveal this, but since you've had all this experience, were there some interviews where you did not get the job, and what do you think you did wrong during that interview if you did not get that job?
Well, I've had a lot of interviews. I have done well on most of them, but of course, nobody bats 1,000. And I'll say this: there's usually 2 or 3 reasons why we don't get the job. One is that the organization has already selected someone, and they already know who they're going to hire. It's often internal, but legally they have to go through the interview process. So it did not matter how well I interviewed, I was not going to get that job. The second reason was I didn't get the job was because I wasn't prepared. I just, for whatever reason, and this has only happened maybe once or twice in my whole life, but I had a couple where I don't know what happened, but I just was not prepared. I thought I was, but I really wasn't. And it was actually a really embarrassing experience for me, but it was a good learning experience. And the third reason was that I just did not answer the questions well. But here's the thing. If you, or when you hear from the company and they tell you that you were not selected, here is the reply. And it's exactly like this. Was there anything I could have done differently to have gotten the job? I'm going to repeat that. Was there anything I could have done differently to have gotten the job? Not what did I do wrong? Not what did I do bad? Was there anything I could have done differently? Now, sometimes they'll say, no, you did fine. We just found someone. They don't want to talk about it. And they're worried maybe they're going to say something that's going to get them in trouble, or they're busy, so they don't want to talk about it. But every once in a while, they'll say, well, yeah, you should have said this, or you didn't do this, or you didn't really answer this question. Now, here's something you can do, and this is so powerful. It's called the follow-up interview. And here's what you do. You ask the interviewer, would you have any time for me to come in and talk to you about my interview? Now, here's what you're doing when you do that. You're making that person your mentor. Even if it's just for 1 hour, that person is your mentor. And we all love being able to mentor people. We all love being able to help others. And so sometimes they will. And much earlier, a lot longer ago, I did this. And they'd make an appointment with me. I would bring my paper and pen, and they would go over what I could have done differently in the interview. I would take notes. And guess what? A lot of times, I'd wind up working there anyway, because they'd remember me. They'd say, wow, that guy really went the extra mile. He humbled himself, and he asked for help, and he asked for my advice, and people love that. Now, let me just say this, you're not doing this with the subtle hopes that they'll hire you. Just let that job go. You lost it for whatever reason, let it go. But people remember this and they're often impressed by this behavior, and they might call you back, which was what happened to me a couple of times. They called me back and said, hey, we have this new position open. Would you be interested?
Mm-hmm.
And I got some of the best jobs. Matter of fact, the job I told you about where I wound up teaching the interviewing class, that's how I did it. It was through the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the best jobs of my life. And then there was another job. It was a teaching job. And it was one of the best jobs of my life. I had so much fun at that job. And if I had not done the follow-up interview, I would not have gotten either one of those jobs. And another thing you can do, if you don't get the job and you ask for a follow-up interview and they decline and they don't want to tell you what you did wrong, you can ask one more question, which is, would you mind if I called you every once in a while to see if there are any new openings or anything that changes? Now, most people will be okay with this. And if you do that, then call back about once a month, every 3 weeks. Just say, hi, my name's Robert Farrell. We interviewed about a month ago, and I just want to let you know I'm still available if anything opens up. Now, remember, you're not just going to one place for interviewing. You're going to hopefully a few places. So hopefully 3 weeks later, you've already secured a job anyway. But if for whatever reason you haven't, this is a great strategy of keeping that relationship open.
Mm-hmm. And likely you would use this strategy for places where you really want to work.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. And how you became an author. So when you first started writing, did you write these business books about job searches, or how did you become a writer afterward? What all your experience helping people with their job searches?
Well, I've always loved writing, and I actually, when I was in high school, I thought I would be a newspaper reporter. I never did wind up doing that, but I've always loved writing. And as I said, I wrote 2 or 3 different books, all self-published, and 2 of them, it never got published. And I was actually looking at the manuscript a few weeks ago, and I was going, this is still pretty good. And I was pretty happy with that. And I wrote, I'll show you this. This was just something I literally published by hand. I put it together at an Office Depot or something, but it's called I Have It, 235 Tips to Help You Find and Keep That Job. And it was like a little, almost like a calendar, a desk calendar. And one of my goals in life is to actually get this published. And the idea was that interviewees would take this book with them. And then while they're in the waiting room, they just look at this book. And there's these very quick little tips. They're all just 1 or 2 sentences each. And they're just quick little tips. It's broken down by the job search process, the resume process, the interview process, and the follow-up process. And then the actual job attainment process, how you behave once you have the job. And so I wrote this, and it was just the idea of you're sitting in the waiting room, you're looking at it, and you're staying focused on the job process, the job interview process.
Mm-hmm. And what about your other work, such as your other books? And did you also not ghostwrite, but co-write the books with people as well?
I co-authored 2 books. One is called The Presidential Lessons. That's this one. And I co-authored this with a fellow I met in my master's program. I was getting a second master's degree in this one in US history. And I met this guy, his name is Todd. and he asked if I would help him co-write a book that he had started. So we wrote that, and that was published last year. And then I met Siam Pasarli after I moved to Chicago. We met at a writer's meetup, and he asked me to help edit a book he was working on. And so when we started the process, when I started editing, I realized he had two books. One was a motivational piece, and one was a step-by-step piece of how to create your own business. And I told him, this is really two books. And so we turned it into two books, and the first book I co-authored and added more content to that book. It's called Be Your Own Boss. And then the second book, Create Your Own Empire, he completely wrote that. I edited it. There it is. Thank you. I edited that book, but I did not really write a whole lot in that book. That was almost 99.999% him, if not 100% him. So yeah, that's how I got started when I met Siam. And he's a terrific guy, by the way. He's really a wonderful person.
Yes. Let's get back to your job search advice. Every bit is important, right? When you first decide to maybe change your job, and then how often do you, let's focus a little bit on the resume part too. How often should you update your resume? Is it only when you change, have another position, or should you revisit it and then see what you need to focus on what you have done in the past, like what skills?
The resume is a tool, so you use it when you need to. So it's like a hammer. I don't carry my hammer with me everywhere I go. I have a place for it. When I need it, I get it out and I use it. So I don't update my resume unless I need to. And then when I do, I do.
Mm-hmm.
When would I need to update my resume? Well, I would update my resume if I'm about to change jobs, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to lose my job, or if I just decide I want to do something different with my life, or if I'm no longer interested in working with my current organization, then yes, I'd get my resume out and update it.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned earlier about attaining a job and how to maintain it, how to be a good employee. So could you give us a little bit of your advice about that?
Everything you did to get the job is what you need to be doing to keep the job. So think about this. What do we do to get a job? We put our best foot forward. Hopefully we're polite, we're appropriate, we're very careful about what we say, we're respectful. And unfortunately, what a lot of people do when they get the job, they think, okay, I'm done. And then they stop doing everything they did to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, it's like they're a different person. Some marriages are like this, people put all their best foot forward, and then after they get married, they relax a little too much, and they're not the kind, loving, respectful person they were before the marriage. And then the marriage has problems. Well, jobs are relationships. They're relationships like marriages or friendships or families. And it takes work and it takes attention to keep those relationships good.
What happens if you are at a place of employment and then you things are not working out well? Let's say maybe it's not a respectful environment and you do want to find another job. How would you manage to how do you approach putting the current job on your resume, and and explaining why, if people ask why you have left that job.
Well, if you haven't had that job a real long time, you don't need to put it on at all necessarily.
What is considered a real long time?
Well, if you've had it around a year, then you need to put it on there. But if you've had it, say 6 months or less, you don't necessarily need to put it on your resume.
Mhm.
You can, but you don't necessarily have to.
And if a person were at a job situation in which people are disrespectful, or maybe some are and some aren't, any advice about how to deal with that?
Well, every situation's different.
Mhm.
All any of us can do is do our best and be as kind as we can be, and work as hard as we can work. A good thing to do is ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I at this job at this place? And if you have a really valid reason, it is going to make it easier to be there. I think Viktor Frankl said, no, Nietzsche said, if you have a good why, then you can overcome any how.
Mhm.
So it's all, again, every situation is different. You
Mhm.
might be in a job and it can be really toxic, and you might decide, no, this is not where I want to be, and try somewhere else.
Mhm. If our listeners, Robert, would like to get more of your advice, how would they find you, and what you find you, and what you know about resumes, job interviews, etc., and job search?
You can reach me at my phone number, which is 619-672-0378. You can email me at Robert Farrell. That's Robert, RobertFarrell 71 at gmail.com.
Robert Farrell, thank you so much for joining us at WZRD today and sharing with us your insight about job searches.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great one.